Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex. And listen, I know there are a lot of characters in Marvel Future Fight. There's over 200 characters in Marvel Future Fight. And even more so, there's even more uniforms in Marvel Future Fight. There's hundreds of different uniforms, characters having 5, 6, 7 different uniforms. And it's confusing as hell. And every single update, we get people coming into the chat, coming into the comment section, complaining, "Oh my god, there's another new update. There's so many uniforms. What are we supposed to do? How do I know which uniforms to buy? What if I don't have the uniform?" Well, I've got something really amazing for you. We are going to rank all of the characters in Marvel Future Fight. We're going to be making a brand new tier list. Well, we're not going to be making. I already made it, okay? You're welcome. Brand new tier list. No uniform. We're ranking all the characters without a uniform at all. Now, it's a little difficult for me. I will say this. It's a little difficult for me to gauge the value of certain characters, especially tier 3, because I never played with them without a uniform, like Ant-Man, like Captain America, like Iron Man. So, you know, I could be a little bit off on some of these characters, but I think for the most part, even if I get like 80% of them right, I think that's pretty damn impressive, because 80% of 200 is like 170, 160 plus. Okay, so that's pretty good. And additionally, on top of that, I want to also say, as always, the standard disclaimer: these are just my ideas. This is just a very rough guide. This is not necessarily the only way that it has to be. You can build whichever character you want without uniforms whatsoever. But if we're talking about power level without uniforms, it's a huge difference than the regular tier list. Like this tier list is going to look nothing like the old tier list. So what I want you to do now is I want you to try and imagine in your mind, what does the old tier list look like? You know, you've got the Omega tier, you've got Deadpool and Quicksilver, then you've got Apocalypse, then you've got Jean Grey, Doctor Strange, you got all those blast types, you got all those universal types, then you go over to Mythic tier. Oh, it's full of all these characters, Luna Snow, blah blah blah, Spider-Man 2099. You keep going down the list. Oh wow, a legendary tier. Okay, now, ready? You guys probably weren't listening to me that whole time, but are you ready to see what this new tier list looks like without uniforms? Because it is wild. Let's take a look. Yeah. Breathe it in. Soak that baby in. This tier list looks absolutely bizarre. And as you can see, most characters actually end up getting relegated to the rare and advanced tier, because uniforms for most characters are major reworks. So without those uniforms, all of those characters lose their major reworks, so they drop several tiers down the line. So you've got characters like Rogue, who goes from hero back down to 0. Of course, Hawkeye goes back down to Mega 0. I don't even know where Hawkeye is. He should be over here, but I think he is... Where is Hawkeye, actually? Maybe I just deleted Hawkeye. Okay, Hawkeye's gone, guys. We got rid of Hawkeye. He's gone forever. But you basically get the point. You've got... Oh, there he is. He's right there. Okay. So you basically get the point. Miles Morales got a huge rework with his uniform. Winter Soldier basically started the trend. All of these characters get rejected. But even characters who had minor upgrades from their uniforms, like Karnak. Nobody remembers how bad Karnak was without his uniform. He is garbage. He's so bad. And yeah, so he gets relegated to toilet tier. So without further ado, let's go ahead, rather than focusing on what's over here, because there's a lot over here. Let's talk about what's over here. Now one more thing. This is not necessary. The uniform not necessary is no longer necessary because it's gone, because there is no such thing as uniform on this list. So again, we are looking at this from the perspective of there not being uniforms for any of these characters. So who ends up taking the cake in the Omega tier? Well, no more speed types. If you can see, most of all, speed types have gotten crazy reworks due to uniforms. And that's a really interesting trend to notice. I mean, we just named Hawkeye, Winter Soldier, Rogue, Miles Morales, Gwenpool, Ant-Man, Domino, X-23. There's Spider-Man. There's so many characters in the speed class who got major reworks with their uniforms. And so they are the ones hit the hardest by this change, and they sort of lose the most out of all the classes. On the flip side, Universals actually gain the most by not having uniforms, and that generally comes from the fact that we've gotten a lot of Universals introduced this year that haven't gotten uniforms. So Deadpool got 3 uniforms this year, but then you have other characters like Doctor Doom, who were introduced at the beginning of the year, and he hasn't gotten any uniforms. So Doctor Doom is amazing, and he was introduced without a uniform, so he goes right to the top. He can do PvE and PvP in the game right now. Of course, same thing goes for Victorious. Also didn't get a uniform. But then added even last year Sentinel. Sentinel's a great character if you're considering no uniforms, and a lot of the mutant characters that would be able to kill Sentinel with uniforms, now they can't kill Sentinel without a uniform anymore, and he becomes a lot stronger, and he can now kill them. Silver Surfer is obviously god tier regardless, but he actually becomes even stronger in this meta because he doesn't have to worry about Jean Greys as much. He doesn't have to worry about Thanos at all. Thanos drops way down to, like, where did he go? He's like over here. Yeah, he's in the bottom of rare tier. Thanos without a uniform is just god awful. He has very few ways of protecting himself. He has very few, like, reliable iframes. He's just not a very good character. So yeah, the Universal class just dominates. Slapstick, introduced recently. Universals are basically just really, really strong in Marvel Future Fight. And this shows how imbalanced it is when you take uniforms out of the list, where you have 6 characters who can easily be considered Omega tier, and you could possibly even make an argument for more. But we have literally 1 blast and 1 speed that even come close to being Omega tier. Omega tier, by the way, is able to do PvP and PvE with the same build. And given the frailty and the fragility of all these characters, now that you take away all their uniforms, I imagine you could give all of these characters damage procs, and they could still survive. And multiple characters here have second lives. You know, Silver Surfer, Doctor Doom, and Slapstick all revive. So that's a big, big plus for PvP. So it's super interesting to see that being the case. Moving over to Mythic Tier, I realized that Nick Fury basically doesn't change at all between having a uniform and not having a uniform. So he can basically do almost all of, 95% of the same things without his uniform. Quicksilver, he's here, but he's really on the edge. And Luna Snow and Deadpool are very, very close to being where he is. But he's just a little bit stronger. Well, he's a lot stronger in PvP and a little bit stronger overall. But he does take a huge hit in PvE without his uniforms. He doesn't have the accumulation on his 3rd skill anymore, so that does matter. Combat types still managed to make a really big push in the Mythic tier, mostly because Mr. Fantastic's uniform did very little for him, so he can still maintain a lot of his same value. Molten Man is still really good because he never got a uniform, so he was always being compared that way. And then Sabretooth and Juggernaut, they still have healing. They still have all defense down without their uniforms, so they're still really good. And you see a lot of characters introduced this year being put into one of these top 3 or top 4 tiers. And that's a really good sign because it means that Marvel Future Fight is considering these new characters, and they're bringing them into the game with value already rather than bringing them into the game and making them weaker. So, you've got, of course, we've touched on Silver Surfer, Doctor Doom, Slapstick, Victorious, all introduced this year. Namor introduced this year. Nick Fury introduced this year. Molten Man, Sabretooth, Juggernaut introduced this year. We go further down into the blast types. Negasonic was introduced this year. Iceman and Rescue were introduced this year. Vision was reworked, his base kit, so that definitely matters as well. They were able to rework a character into the Mythic tier, which I think is quite impressive. Ghost Panther was from the end of last year, but Dr. Voodoo is from this year. And Ant-Man is the only sort of old character. Ant-Man and Nova are 2 of the only, like, old tier characters that are able to hang on for so long, along with Quicksilver being actually I believe the oldest character on this list. No, I lied. Jean Grey's older. Jean Grey is no, Doctor Strange is the oldest. Anyways, Doctor Strange is pretty bad without his uniform, but he's still pretty good because a lot of his damage comes from his tier 3 skill. But then you go over into some of the other blast type tier 3s and it gets really bad. Like Iron Man without his uniform is seriously sad. No self-healing. Gotta take that away. No self-healing, no all defense down, no increased damage against supervillains. Basically, all he has is some iframes. His tier 3 skill gets changed. It's so bad. Same thing goes for Cyclops. He just becomes so bad without his uniform. No self-healing. Hela loses her support buff, so she only has the leadership now. There's just so many things that get taken away. Venom loses his striker ability, so Venom gets relegated back to, like, normal tier because he's just so bad. He might as well be toilet tier. And of course, there's tons more toilet tier characters now that, you take away their uniform. So it's actually a really interesting list. I actually had a lot of fun. It took me a while to make this list, but I had a lot of fun making it because you have to reconsider a lot of old characters. And it actually makes a lot of the new characters look really good. Like, Jubilee, Hydro Man, all introduced this year. Kid Omega, Bishop. They're all really good by the standards of no uniform. Like, if you take a no uniform Sharon Rogers and you compare her to Jubilee might be better. There might be certain cases where tier 2 Sharon Rogers can accumulate more and do more, but Jubilee hits really hard for a tier 2 in this day and age. but we just always compare her to a tier 3 Sharon Rogers with her newest uniform, which is sort of an unfair comparison. Iceman is even better. He's got damage reduction. He's got a lot of different weapons available. Cable is one of the few that sticks up, time after time because his core abilities haven't changed from his first build to his latest uniform. Of course, Psylocke is still godly. Jean Grey is still really, really good. It's just really interesting to see how taking away uniforms really does shape things and twist things. I mean, Gorilla Man is actually really good. Comparatively speaking, if you compare like a level 70 Gorilla Man to an old level 70 Apocalypse, I think Gorilla Man might be better. He's got better healing, he's got, more consistent damage, and he's got a much easier rotation to play through. So I think it's really, really interesting. And I could just sit here, for an hour talking about every single character because they all of the ones that had uniforms to begin with shift. And then the other interesting thing is to talk about how characters without uniforms just their value just spikes. I mean, like Arrow is it's not an amazing character, but she does become amazing when you take away all these speed uniforms. Like her all defense down becomes one of the only ways to get all defense down from any speed type in the game now that you don't have any of the other uniforms involved. I mean, Rogue lost her all defense down, etc. And then she hits really hard when you compare her to characters like No Uniform Angel, No Uniform Spider-Man 2099. She definitely out DPSs all of them. She's just very fragile, but even Korath, his value spikes up. And so it's really a cool sort of thing to do. Now, how is this really helpful for you? Well, if you don't have crystals for uniforms, if you're trying to save uniforms for deluxe packs and things like that, then you can look at these 3 tiers and sort of decide which characters you can buy, buy or build from them. And it's good to see that this is a mixture of native tier 2 characters, biosub or X-Gene sub characters, but also bioselector characters. Like going from the bottom of legendary tier, that's a free character. Kid Omega is free, Bishop is free, Human Torch is free. That's a crystal character. Sharon Rogers is given as a free tier 2. Gorilla Man and Swordmaster are both free. Angel is free, native tier 2. And then we go over here, and it's similar again. You've got 2 paywalls and 2 free characters side by side. So it's a really nice balance, I find, of paywall and native tier 2, which is expensive in the form of time and or gold, not necessarily dollars. And then completely free characters. And over here we can see that it's a bit more heavily leaning towards the other 2 options. You've got, paywall, native tier 2, native tier 2, native tier 2, paywall, semi-paywall or almost paywall, extremely hard to grind, and then paywall. So this is probably the only tier where it gets really punishing, and that is interesting, and that's that's not really a good trend. So you want Marvel Future Fight, the devs, to look at that and maybe try to add a couple of characters that could be really strong without uniforms, who are bioselector characters, are free grindable characters, but they're not that far off considering how many we have here in the Mythic tier and how many we have in the Legendary tier. It's like almost 50% in both. So yeah, with that being said, let me know what you guys think of this no uniform tier list. This is a really interesting video, really interesting topic, and I think it really takes the whole meta of Marvel Future Fight and flips it on its head, because characters that you wouldn't even consider necessarily suddenly become so much better when you take uniforms out of the equation. So hit me up in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching this video. Happy holidays, happy new year almost, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.